All right, welcome back. I was just looking through drafts between Peter Chiarelli and Don Sweeney. I figured I might as well just make a video of it. It's pretty boring. It's not too intensive or exciting, but I'm going to talk about it because here I am. So Don Sweeney has had 11 drafts to date. Assuming he retains his job throughout the remainder of the season, it'll be his 12th draft. Keep in mind the two most recent drafts. It's still pretty soon to kind of make a determination on that. Whereas Peter Chiarelli, who is a very polarizing former general manager in the NHL, did some good things, did a lot of, like a substantial amount of questionable things. He had 9 drafts with the Boston Bruins. It's kind of crazy to think that Don Sweeney has been a general manager longer than Peter Chiarelli was. It's kind of mind-blowing, but let's just kind of dive into the list. So I have little ones next to names indicating they were a first-round pick. I have the name of the player and the number of games played. I didn't add up all the games played and so on and go from there, but and I'm counting James Higgins because we should expect to see him in an NHL uniform at some point in the near future. We'll see, depending on how this year goes at BC, if he comes straight out of college after this season or if he has another year at BC. But he's on the board because we can expect him. Another guy I probably should have put on the board is Dean Letourneau, considering he's bad or about a point per game. I suspect we'll see him another year at BC, though. I'd kind of be shocked if he came to the NHL starting next year. But let's dive into it. Most recent draft is James Higgins, only one on the board. Anyone else on the board has seen playing time in the NHL. So Matthew Poitras, 66 games. Frederick Brunette, 1 game defenseman, still in the AHL. Fabian Lysell, first-round pick, 12 games. Mason Lowry, who's a second-round pick, 146 games. Travis Kuntar, 1 game. Riley Duran, 2 games. John Beecher, former first-round pick, 148 games. He's still playing. Jakub Lauko, 139 games. Urho Vakanainen, first-round pick, 204 games. Jack Studnicka, I'm surprised he stuck around for 114 games, I'm not going to lie. Jeremy Swayman, 111 games. I'll put a little note next to him. Charlie McAvoy, this was in the 2016 draft, 625 games. Trent Frederick, 371 games. I thought Frederick was a first-round pick. That was 2016. Yeah, he was. He was a first-round pick. Ugh. Okay, close enough. You can kind of see it. Ryan Lindgren, 434 games. He did not play a game in a Bruins uniform. He was traded along with Ryan Spooner, Matt Bolesky, a first-round pick, and a seventh-round pick for Rick Nash as a rental. Rick Nash, in 11 games during the regular season, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. He was a -4. And in the playoffs, he played 12 games with the Boston Bruins, 3 goals, 2 assists, 5 points. He was a -7. And then they did not re-sign him. Yeah. So sometimes the cost of rentals can be a little pricey, especially when you're giving up prospects that may or may not pan out to be nothing. So Ryan Lindgren, kind of the exception there. Kopanen, 30 games played. Alex Steen, 60 games played. And now we're into 2015. And you can see a lot of guys from 2015 at least saw a chance to play in the NHL at some point, even if it was for a limited amount of time. Zaboral, 76 games, first-round pick. Another first-round pick, Jake DeBrusk, 579 games. The third first-round pick, Zach Senyshyn, 16 games played. I'm really surprised he got 16 games in the NHL. But 2015, you give the guy a look, right? Brandon Carlo was the second round of 2015, 655 games, still playing, still pretty effective. Forsbacka Karlsson, 29 games played. Jeremy Lauzon, 333. Dan Vladar, 124, and Cam Hughes played 2 games in the NHL. So over the 11 drafts, 25 of the 65 players drafted by Don Sweeney have played in an NHL uniform in some shape, form, or capacity. That's 38.5% of draftees, which is what it is. 2015 is kind of carrying these stats quite a bit. He had, what, 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of 10 players in 2015 have played in the NHL. Again, in some capacity, Cam Hughes, 2 games, Senyshyn, 16 games. Still counts, right? And 2016, also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his 6 draft picks played in the NHL in some shape, form, or capacity. And since then, it's pretty much been bare bones. The drafting's really been questionable since. And a lot of that, a lot of the 20, like the first year or two with a general manager, it depends on who the general manager coming in is, but often they'll rely on the scouts and so on that exist before making changes and tweaks. And the tweaks and changes we've seen Don Sweeney make have really not bared a whole lot of fruit in comparison to some other teams. There have been some great later round steals and so on in a lot of these drafts. Wyatt Johnson, second round pick, for example, that were not necessarily picked up on. It's probably a terrible example, but you get the point. Excluding the last 2 drafts, so 2015, 2025, 2024, 44% of all players drafted have made an NHL appearance. Again, that number is largely carried by 2015 and 2016. I should have done the stats from beyond that. Yeah, it's kind of rough after that. But we're moving on to Peter Chiarelli. Right, 2014, his first round pick was David Pastrnak, which was considered a late round steal at the time. 784 games played, climbing the Bruins list of best goal scorers in a Boston uniform. Ryan Donato, 515 games played, still going. Danton Heinen, 577 games played. Anders Bjork, 225 games played. Remember, he was traded to Buffalo. I always mess up this guy's name. Chiarelli, 40 games played. Anton Blee, 85 games played. Now we're moving on to, what is it, 2014, 2013. 2013? Is it 2013? No, there's no first round picks in 2013. Blee and Chiarelli were in 2013. So 2012, Malcolm Subban, first round pick for the Bruins, played 87 games. There was a lot of hype around him being a future starting goaltender in the NHL, and that never quite panned out, which happens. But Matt Grzelcyk, also 559 games played. Seth Griffith. I struggled for his name my entire life, but I love his name. 80 games played. Matt Benning, 464 games played. He is another player who never played a game in a Boston Bruins uniform. Next up is a first-round pick, Dougie Hamilton, 864 games played, still playing. Koklechad. What? I usually say Kolyachonic, even though that's not correct. Koklechaya, whatever. Kolyachonic, 9 games played. Ferland, 7 games. O'Gara, 33 games. And then we're moving on to the Tyler draft. Tyler Seguin, drafted 2nd overall in the first round. 1,016 games played. I am struggling with my numbers today. Ryan Spooner, 325 games played. Cunningham, 63. Floric, 4 games. Zane McIntyre, was still around a couple of years ago. Really kind of an AHL guy who would be called up on an emergency basis. I don't know if he's still playing. I'd assume so. 8 games played. Trotman, 91 games played. All these guys were within 5 drafts of each other. So that's 2014 to 2010, as noted at the bottom. So Chiarelli, kind of a questionable start in the beginning, and then really found his groove with drafting later on. There's some nice players in here. Moving on though, pre 2010, right? Jordan Caron, 157 games played. He was a first round pick. There was a lot of hype around him, and it never panned out at the NHL level. Lane McDermott, 21 games. Randall, 27. Ben Sexton, just 2 games. That kind of surprised me. I kind of liked him as a prospect, but it is what it is. Colborn never played a game in a Bruins jersey, 295 games. Suave, 1 game. Michael Hutchinson, 154 games. He never technically saw any ice time. He's a goaltender. Never saw any ice time as a Boston Bruin, but he was in the lineup on the roster, sitting on the bench for games as a backup goaltender. He technically was on the roster for the Bruins, just never played. Arneal, 1 game. Zach Hamill, again, another first-round pick that there was quite a bit of hype around that really didn't pan out. 20 games played for Zach Hamill. Where are we? Tommy Cross, BC legend, 3 games played. He was excellent at BC, by the way, Boston College. And then going into the first draft that Peter Chiarelli had, Phil Kessel, 1,286 games. Milan Lucic, 1,177 games. Brad Marchand, 1,130 games. And Bednarok, 42 games. So, but overall, you got some strong players in that very first draft. Of the 54 players Peter Chiarelli drafted, 34 of them saw NHL ice time in some shape, form, or capacity. That is a 63% rate, which is pretty solid. So it's kind of crazy, kind of just comparing like the 9 years versus, we'll say, like 9 or so years of Sweeney to Chiarelli drafting, because most of this excludes, aside from this number right here and James Higgins, it kind of excludes the last 2 drafts. It's kind of 9 to 9. And we may see some of those later picks start to trickle into the lineup at some point. One being potentially Cole Spicer of the 2022 draft. He struggled his first couple years in college, went to the USHL, and is back, I believe, at Western Michigan, and is around a point per game. So we'll see. Sometimes those players translate into being an NHL player, and sometimes they don't necessarily. So usually when a player's at or around a point per game, at least a forward, there's someone to keep an eye on. And usually they'll see time at the AHL level to really get a good assessment and evaluation of those players to see if they're ready to come to the NHL. Some of them we see called up, and some of them we never see. There still might be a few more players that come up from previous drafts of Mr. Sweeney. But overall, there have been some great picks. Sticking to your guns, taking McAvoy, taking Swayman, was he 3rd or 4th round or something? Right? Those were pretty good. Lowry, not bad. I think he was a 2nd round pick, so it is what it is. Patra, 2nd round pick, could pan out. And then you kind of have to go back to, Frederick and Lindgren in 2016 were good picks, I guess. Frederick, 1st round pick, kind of. Ryan Lindgren, though, probably could have been a late 1st round pick. At the same time, never saw any play time in a Bruins uniform. 2015, right? You kind of whiff on 2 of your 3 1st round picks in 2015, and we all know how loaded that draft was. Both, just looking at the players available, when Sweeney had 3 consecutive picks, it was definitely a fumble. And Jake DeBrusk is a fine NHL player. I do like him a lot. There were also better options than Jake DeBrusk at that time, many better options. So there's that. He did get Carlo in the 2nd round, which was nice. He did draft Lozon and Vladar. Vladar's having kind of a good year this year in Philly. And Lozon's kind of just a 3rd pairing defensive almost enforcer type guy, defensive defenseman, serviceable. But at the same time, you need a little more from your drafting under John Sweeney. Remember, Peter Chiarelli wasn't known as this great drafter and developer, but it was successful enough, right? So there's that. Impact guys for Don Sweeney, we have Swayman, McAvoy, and DeBrusk. And I'm talking about like solid NHL players and like, very notable NHL players. And Ryan Lindgren, for example, solid second pair defensive defenseman. I love Ryan Lindgren a ton. And I like, I love the dude. Didn't quite, that's kind of like the cutoff right there. Whereas, and you can obviously make arguments and figure stuff out on your own as well. It's not like this is what I say goes, because I do have Ryan Donato up here, but Ryan Donato, few 30 goals, or what he had 30 goals last year or 2 years ago, looking pretty solid this year, which is an odd thing. David Pastrnak, so we got 2, Dougie Hamilton 3, Sagan 4, Kessel, Lucic, Marchand 7. So 7 solid NHL guys to 3 so far. If Hagens figures it out at the NHL level, it could be 4. Maybe Dean Latorno makes it 5, but at the same time, now you're getting into 11 drafts versus 9 drafts, and there have been more all-star level players from Chiarelli's draft days than Sweeney's. So it's kind of hit or miss. You can make the case like, oh, Boston's been a playoff team for so long, and the Bruins got to draft second overall one year. Yeah, that's true, but they also won the Stanley Cup in 2011. There have been, it was Sagan and Hamilton, I think, was the 9th overall pick. And Phil Kessel, what was Phil Kessel? What was that, 2006? We're going back. He was the 5th overall pick. James Hagens was the 7th, which has been Sweeney's highest pick. Right, but at the same time, you got Pastrnak taken in the late first round. Who else do you have? You have Lucic and Marchand later on. You have Ryan Donato. Go figure. Who would have guessed? Right? Whereas the Bruins, you have McAvoy, who was a first-round pick. You have Swayman, who is a goaltender at the end of the day. And you have Jake DeBrusk, who is a first-round pick. So kind of I'd say the depth or later finds in Chiarelli's drafting have been more impressive than Sweeney's tenure so far. That being said, same discussion we had for Sweeney with, coming into a new job as a general manager, probably keeping some of those scouts and scouting reports. What was he hired in late April or May, just before the draft? You're not going to go out and re-scout everybody. He's pretty much using the scouting notes of Peter Chiarelli in 2015. And I'm not quite sure what happened with the first round, because a lot of those picks were very, very off the board. But the rest of the draft was fine. Right? But the same can be said about Chiarelli when he started, because honestly, I don't really remember. It was a long time ago. Marchand, Lucic, and Kessel all taken, and Lucic in his prime he was a really good player. And it is what it is now, and I'm not going to speak on that, but he was a 30-goal guy he was a 30-goal power forward that I don't think I've ever seen him lose a fight in a Bruins uniform. He was that good and that forceful. He was insane in his prime. And Brad Marchand, we know, probably Hall of Famer. Pastrnak is on Hall of Fame pace. Hamilton, probably not, but maybe in that consideration. Sagan's probably in that consideration. Right, and if you're looking over here, McAvoy might get consideration at some point. And depending on how the remainder of Swayman's career goes, maybe him. But overall, I'd say Chiarelli did a little better. It's also that thing where, as the years progress, the scouts kind of get better at their job, and the mock draft lists and so on usually are a little more accurate than they were. So it's a lot harder to find later round steals nowadays than it used to be. So there's also that factor. But I thought it was interesting to kind of just look at this, and it is what it is. The picks have been drafted, right? So, and it's not really, I'm not in that position to move these picks around in prospects and so on. So, it was just fun to look at. Figured I'd make a video on it. And, thanks. Take care.